Okay, patch 10.3 rundown. Welcome, everybody. As we're nearing the end of the set, the idea here is the changes are going to be a little lighter. There are still quite a few changes, though, this patch, but they're all going to be very minor. I've talked about the balance strategy before, in that we're trying to just nudge things in the right direction. So you're going to see a lot of nudges this patch. As for patch 10.2, it started really good, but Light's kind of emerged as a very dominant strategy, kind of shutting a lot of things out. So we're going to hope to approach that and move forward. All right, on the trait side, Assassin isn't really acting enough as a counterplay option to some of the backline strategies like Ranger and Light. So 3 Assassin is getting a small buff to try to boost it up so that, you know, if you're running up against a bunch of Rangers, 3 Assassins in your comp should be good. And then 6 Assassin was a bit too much of a snowball. It was like, once you hit it, everything just kind of died in one hit, and you would win. Unless you were up against one of your counter options, then you would lose. So 6 Assassin is going down just a little bit. This way, again, there can actually be a little bit more counterplay positioning, and you don't just die instantly. So again, the goal of this is to hopefully make Assassins much more of an anti-Ranger option. 3 Assassin comps. I imagine some Sins will get a small buff from this. Light. Light is getting a bit of a buff and nerf. So 3 Light is getting buffed. Very small buff, but this will allow some more 3 Light comps to exist. Again, we do like some of the more creative 3-3-3 comps. 6 and 9 Light, on the other hand, are getting their attack speed nerfed. And then this is the change that's going to get added tomorrow. But Light is going to be healing less. Light right now has this weird property in that, let's say you attack the person in the front line with a red buff, it doesn't really help them. So the only really good way to apply Morello or red buff to the back line is like a singed. So it's really hard to actually properly anti-heal Light. So we're going to nerf Light a bit. There are more Light nerfs beyond this, but this, again, all Light nudges in the right direction. That last one's probably a pretty big one, though. Lunar, the Lunar units have been really good. People are excited to use Leona. People are excited to use Karma. The Lunar trait, though, is basically non-existent. Doesn't really do a whole lot. So just a very minor buff to the Lunar. My OCD likes this because now it actually says 15, 15, 15. So that's kind of nice. So very small. And then lastly is Shadow. If you remember the patch before this, 6-piece was 150. Well, 6 now 175 was a little strong. So we're just, again, nudging it right back to that middle ground. So 175 goes to 165. You'll barely notice this. So, again, lots of small nudges. All right, units. Kog'Maw is getting a small spell buff. 25 damage at 1, 25 damage at 2, and 75 at 3. This is actually to make up for a Luden's nerf that you'll see later. But it also makes Kog'Maw a bit more of the carry he's supposed to be. So Kog'Maw gets a very small spell buff. Orin has been kind of the worst Warden for a long time. You basically run him in Electric or you don't run him. So we're going to buff his spell quite a bit here, actually. And so what this does is when he casts his spell, that person is now fragile for a very long time. So now they'll be hit for 10 seconds instead of 4. And the crit amp goes up just a little bit. So this will make Orin a little bit better. Vayne. Vayne gets an attack speed nerf. Vayne being the carry of the Light comps isn't really okay, especially late game. It's a 1-cost unit. You should be seeing things like Lucien being the carry. And right now, Vayne is way too easy to be kind of the catch-all carry. So the 0.75 becoming 0.7 is really big. Because again, everything else, all the attack speed that he gets from Light, or that she gets from Light, will also be brought down because your base attack speed is what affects your, like, how much you gain from attack speed. So this is actually a pretty big nerf to Vayne. Braum gets a very minor buff. Basically, 2-star gets a 5% buff. 1 star gets a 10% buff. Basically, when Braum casts his shield, it's a bit tankier. So, really minor. Jax has also been underperforming a little bit. When he casts a spell, it doesn't really do a whole lot. So 2 and 3 star just gets a small damage buff. You should be a little bit more afraid of the Jax spell. Leblanc, same thing. Leblanc also gets a small damage buff. Leblanc gets 25 damage basically at every level except 3 star. So yeah, that's good there. Reksai is the front line for Predator comps and Assassin comps, so just making Reksai a little bit tankier. That way she can survive a little bit longer. And lastly is Yasuo at the 2 star level. Yasuo is supposed to be an anti-carry. Doesn't get to cast that often, so just a little less mana so that Yasuo can cast a little quicker into the fight and possibly kill that carry. So, sweet. Nocturne. Now that Nocturne Blademaster bug got fixed, that last nerf to Nocturne was pretty big, where it no longer does double damage on the swing. We're giving Nocturne back some of his AD. If you look at the stat-wise, Nocturne was like barely better than LeBlanc, except also worse because no spell. So Nocturne should be a little bit stronger. Will this bring back Blender? Probably not, but a little bit stronger. Mundo, same thing. Mundo is supposed to be a frontline tanky berserker. Hasn't quite been tanky enough, so we're giving him a little bit more HP to put him on Scion levels. So that should be good. Yep, 9 docs will be real strong now. Annie is getting some bigger changes. She probably should have got these a while ago. But now Annie Tibber's HP actually scales with level, meaning that 1 star Annie isn't quite as dominant of like, holy crap, there's just a 2000 HP Tibbers on the field. So that's a big change. And then it actually scales up. So what this actually looks like right now is that 1 star Annie is a bit nerfed, 2 star Annie is a bit buffed, and 3 star Annie is massively buffed. And then also Annie Tibbers gets to attack just a tiny bit faster. So, woohoo! Lastly is Jana. Jana, this one's actually a bit of an oversight. But Jana is not supposed... Like, we're not supposed to have stuns in our game shorter than 1.5 seconds. Because they're not very appreciable. So Jana is now a 1.5 second stun instead of 1 second stun. Which is interesting because when I told people about this, their reaction was, wait, Jana stuns? So yeah, so now Jana actually stuns appropriately. Lucien. Lucien, as I mentioned, is supposed to be the carry of light comps. After the last nerf, Lucien kind of fell off hard. So we're buffing Lucien. The goal is the last nerf to Lucien nerfed his interaction with light, because it used to be that if he was the last one alive in a light comp, it was just like ungodly. It would kill 6 people. We fixed that. But now base Lucien, when he has no light stacks, is like really weak. So gets 2 extra shots per ult, which is good, and does a little bit more damage based on his AD. So if you put AD items on him, they're a little bit more beneficial. So that's a good thing. Olaf, this is not a buff that you should care about. This is not realistic. This is just 3-star Olaf. 3-star Olaf is getting buffed because 3-star Olaf isn't actually that great compared to other 3-star forecasts. So, whoopee-doo. Okay, Yorick. This is actually the most changes we've ever done to a champion in one patch. Usually when we do these patch rundowns, you'll see like 2 lines like Lucien here. But Yorick is getting 4 changes. Yorick HP is going up, and I know you're like, what? Why are we buffing? But the big thing here is that we want Yorick to be a frontliner in any comp. So he's getting a little bit more health to be a frontline. But his mana is being nerfed by 10, which means he's less likely to cast and much less likely to cast multiple times. Then from here, the issue we have right now is that 1-star Yorick versus 2-star Yorick, the jump is way too massive. On live right now, a 1-star Yorick gives you 2 casts for 500 health. So basically adds 1,000 HP, 1,000 HP effective health to your team. And then 2-star, you get 2,400 effective health to your team. So now at 1-star, you get 3 ghouls, but they're weaker, so 1,200. So 1,000 to 1,200. It's a small buff for 1-star Yorick, but 2,400 to 2,100 on the 2-star Yorick. So that's a bit of a nerf to Yorick as well. So the big thing here is like GA Yorick should be worse because it'll cast less often. When he does cast, there are less ghouls. And so yeah, 2-star Yorick just won't be quite as big of a crazy thing. So the hope is that with the Vayne nerf, the Yorick adjustments, and the light buff nerf, that'll be enough to bring light down to a fair level without removing it. So yeah, that's the hope. Lastly is Master Yi. Master Yi is getting an attack speed buff. Try to make him a character. So he'll just get to attack even faster. Again, for a 5 cost, Master Yi continues to be kind of the least excited 5 cost. So, bit of a buff there. Zed. Zed buff. I know that's crazy, but yeah, we're buffing Zed. So Zed can now get his first cast off more often. It feels like in a lot of games right now, Zed just never gets to cast. So a little bit of a buff there. And then lastly, Lux. Lux 1-star is proving a little too strong. This is especially true of like Shadow Lux, Steel Lux, Crystal Lux. It's like as soon as you hit the 1-star with the right items, you're basically done. So we're nerfing just 1-star Lux. So yeah, that's it for champions. Items. Infinity Edge. Infinity Edge is being pulled down quite a bit. This is a pretty big nerf to Infinity Edge. This means the double Infinity Edge is now like 30% weaker. This is pretty big. I still think it's going to be a good item. I mean, you saw me win a game with it earlier. It's still good. It's just not quite like destruction good. So Ionic Spark has basically been unusable. So Ionic Spark gets a small buff. Luden's Echo. This is a bit of an adjustment. 1-star Luden's is basically a trap. So Luden's 1-star gets buffed. 2 doesn't change. And 3 was a little too dominant. 2 Ludens on a Kog'Maw was a little nutty. 500 damage was just like bonkers. So we're just pulling that back a bit. So 25 damage. And again, some of these you might be saying are like too little, too much. We're doing nudges. We are perfectly doing nudges. So this combined with the Cog. So now Cog will hit the single target much harder, but the splash will not just like delete 5 units. So, and then lastly is Static Shiv. Static Shiv is getting a very small buff. Static Shiv has kind of been the weaker version compared to the Infinity Edge. So very small buff to Static Shiv. Okay, let's talk the big one here. This is probably the biggest change coming to this patch and probably changes the meta most crazy. Spatula now never appears on Carousel. Ever. So, the issue has been that Spatula was always intended to be this very rare, interesting thing that sometimes you get and you're like, oh, sweet, I can do something I've never been able to do before. Unfortunately, with the frequency it was showing up, first carousel, second carousel, third carousel, it basically has far too often been, here's how to exactly get the spatula comp that will win you the game. You hard int, get your spatula, force comps, and do exactly what you're supposed to do every time. So, again, spatula is supposed to be a unique, rare thing you adapt to. This game is about adapting to random situations that you've never expected before. So, spatula is gone. So you can't plan around crazy strats, but sometimes you will still get spatulas, and that's when you can make a change. This is a test. Spatulas might come back, though if they did come back, it would be in much less quantities. They might come back for the next set, but right now we want to see the impact this has. And I think it'll be better for the meta in the short term anyway. So with that, we've also adjusted the gold box drop rates. So within the gold boxes now, there's less gold in champions and more spatulas. So when you see a gold box, the odds of getting a spatula are pretty dramatically increased. So you should see a bit more spatulas from drops. Another minor change here, Krugs. One of the worst things you can have happen is you start the game off in the first 3 PvE rounds, and you get your usual like 3 to 4 items plus some gold. And then you get to Krugs, and you get 1 box, and it's only 2 gold. And you're like stuck. So what we've done is we've made sure that Krugs always drops 2 boxes now. So you won't be quite as hurt if all your items ended up on wolves and raptors. So this should just help alleviate the item curve a bit. And then lastly, you saw me doing this one. Touching the edge of the ring during carousel stage no longer ports you back to the middle. So you can actually like right-click jam right up against the edge of the carousel. So that's a great thing. Feels pretty good. Honestly, we should have made this changes ages ago. So. And then lastly, we have some of the bug fixes. Some of these are not great. Some of these are whatever. Multiple Titans Resolve are no longer multiplicative. Right now, if you have 3 Titans Resolve on a character, they're doing 800% damage when it's fully stacked. Now they will do 300% damage. 400%. Yeah, 400%. So it's just a little abusive. So we removed that. It's now additive. Inferno no longer procs spell shields like Trap Claw. That was a really shitty situation that made Trap Claw worse. Trap Claw should be better. Kog'Maw's spell will no longer target untargetable units. So that's a good change for Kog'Maw. Leblanc and Yasuo now properly deal spell damage to champions with Quicksilver. This isn't just Quicksilver, by the way. Like, this also applies to Olaf. But anything, like, their damage will actually now happen regardless of the CC state. Lucian's tooltip got clarified a bit, so it's a little easier to read. No big deal there. And Karma can now target untargetables with her shield and link Zephyr and Soulbound. So Zephyr and Soulbound no longer get screwed up by this. So, okay, that's it for 10.3. These are the changes coming to 10.3 on Wednesday. Hopefully they make the meta more fresh and more exciting. I think the spatula change in particular will have a pretty big impact on the meta. We'll be seeing a lot less light forcing and things like that. So we'll see how it goes. All right, that's it for this patch rundown. Take it easy and enjoy.